Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to our monthly webinar. The title of today's webinar is Dependable Instruction and Management Strategies for Un-dependable Children, Teaching Children Diagnosed with Neurological-Based Behavioural Problems, Part 2. My name is Peter Cribb and I'm the National Catch Program Director at the Catch Global Foundation. Before we get started, I would like to take care of a little housekeeping. First of all, our webinar today is being recorded and an archive will be made available on the catchinfo.org website, along with the PDF of the presentation slides. During today's webinar, we encourage you to ask questions via the chat box, which you can access through the control panel at the top of your screen. You can type in your questions at any time, but to keep us on schedule, we will try to hold off on answering them until the Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. When typing your questions into the chat box, be sure to select the option to send your message to all attendees. We are an international leader in conducting research and providing programs that promote healthy living for children, their families and communities. Our work fosters health behaviours among youth, influences policy and environmental change to support healthy living, and advances professional education and community service. You can find out more about the Centre and its work in school health on the website www.msdcentre.org. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. John Crumpets, our guest for today. And actually, Dr. John's returning after presenting part one of the subject in this webinar. Dr. Crumpets is a 35-year veteran of the health and physical education profession. He has experience at every level of the educational continuum. Dr. Crumpets is recognised within his profession as an expert on the psychosocial effects of sport and fitness activities of children's physical and emotional development. Starting in 2000 with the University of Texas Health Science Center, Dr. Crumpets has been a national trainer with the CATCH program for the last 13 years. Dr. Crumpets speaks and trains from first-hand experience, not only as a public school educator, but as a child care director. As a member of the CATCH team at the University of Texas, he has been instrumental to the development of the CATCH training model. Welcome back, Dr. Crumpets.
Thank you, Peter. And good morning to everyone attending today. Thank you for tuning in. As the title infers, we'll spend the majority of today's session on specific instructional management and supervisory strategies that I hope will help you, PE teachers specifically, and all teachers in general who work with children in structured physical activity sessions, provide a learning environment and experience that meets all of your students' needs, especially those with neurological disorders. Since the last webinar on the topic, I've received many good suggestions and constructive feedback from past listeners, and I'm very grateful for those of you who are participating and did participate in post-webinar discussions. One specific suggestion I'd like to address is during the first series, I sometimes refer to children with disorders as autistic children instead of children with autism. Being kindly corrected by many listeners, I truly understand how important it is to recognize the child first and the condition second. It's a subtle but very, very important distinction. Much as referring to a person of different racial origin by the color of their skin, instead of recognizing them as a person who just happens to have a different color of skin than I do. Children with disabilities are individuals who deserve the same effort in providing them with educational opportunities that will maximize their learning, while also, and most importantly, being fully integrated into the social community of the class and the school. As with the first webinar, I need to disclaim any professional expertise in terms of preparation, professional preparation in the subject matter, beyond being an adult, a father with an adult with autism, an adult daughter with autism, specifically Aspergers syndrome, and duly diagnosed with expressive language delay and apraxia. Managing a child care center that was recognized as a quality program that met the needs of children diagnosed with various neurological disorders, and attending workshops, pursuing self-study, and working with children with neurological disorders in our child care center and presently in the Port Aransas Parks and Rec after school and summer camp programs. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to spend 3 parts today. We're going to quickly review the common diagnosis of children with neurological disorders. We're going to identify those management, supervisory, and instructional strategies, and then some final thoughts on understanding and accepting children with neurological disorders and children with difficult behaviors, all children with difficult behaviors. Children with neurological disorders are those who process information and stimuli differently. That's probably the most profound difference. These children lack coping skills. They have low frustration tolerance and faulty perception of their environment. They are often incapable of expressing their emotions verbally and instead act out in physical ways that may become disruptive in structured learning environments. We often see them as and make the jump in judgment to their behaviors are intended to disrupt. During the first webinar, we really spent a lot of time going over many of these primary diagnoses and understanding that often they're often dual diagnosis, not simply one distinct diagnosis for a child's behavior. Science has hypothesized that it has to do with the neurotransmitters and the imbalances within the brain that cause psychiatric type conditions. And again, it is not about manipulation. Children with neurological disorders cannot control the manifestations of their disability. So it's not about manipulation or misbehavior. Again, in the first webinar, we studied and looked at many manifestations and idiosyncrasies and behaviors going from the low end of the continuum up to the raging behaviors. We talked a lot about how to deal with those behaviors, and we focused on the idea that punishment didn't work. Talking about you can see a child in a wheelchair has a disability. In the same light, a neurologically impaired child cannot control their behavior, and so the traditional reward and punishment only further delays helping children. So today's presentation, what we're going to do is look at the low end and maybe those middle behaviors and how we might proactively create a learning environment that prevents those behaviors or mediates those behaviors where they are not so disruptive to the class. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to get out of our comfort zone and move a little bit closer to where that magic happens. Before I begin, I want to jump around here. Yes. So let's go ahead and start with the idea that formal play times need to be structured so all children can experience success. So the Catch PE instructional management and supervisory strategies can meet the attention and social and physical needs of children with neurological disorders as well as others. We're going to, a little disclaimer, not a disclaimer, but let's kind of put it in context. The webinar today, you might say, is the best case scenario. I do recognize that there are PE teachers, after school programs and such that have very large classes with very little equipment. The third or the fourth bullet down there, in Miami, in the middle schools in Miami, they have the only physical education facilities they have are outdoor covered, asphalt covered areas, and their teachers have as many as 60 to 70 kids per teacher. So that certainly is an extreme, but it's not unusual for physical education teachers, especially in Texas, where they have worked hard for to get kids to have daily PE. In the way that they do that is they have a class coming through their gym every 25 minutes. They also, many teachers are facing excessive assessment requirements. For the reasons of documenting the value of the program academically, principals or school physical education coordinators are requiring, and for good reason, requiring documentation of learning in the classroom. So physical education teachers are facing a lot of barriers, and we're going to hit on a couple more as we go through the slides, that don't necessarily make it easy to adopt some of these suggestions, or if not to adopt them, to be consistent in application. The Catch Basics are a part of the physical education curriculum and the physical activity curriculum that identify, the acronym identifies instructional practices, management practices, and supervisory practices that do lead to children increasing MVPA, having a maximum amount of repetitions for skill development, and also to create an environment that's enjoyable for the children to participate, which makes their choice to participate easier. Now here's another, when you think about kids coming into the gym, the very first thought is the gymnasium, the classroom for physical education, may not be immediately conducive to the needs of a child with neurological disorders. The noise in the gym, the whistles blowing, kids yelling, echoing, it can be very painful and very distracting for a child with neurological disorders. So my suggestions here have to do with, at the beginning of the year, when you are starting your year, you might consider starting the year with low or no or low volume music when the kids come in. I know a lot of teachers like to have music going, and it adds to the perception of fun for the kids when they come in. But you can add that later. If you get a child used to coming to the gym and slowly get them to accept that the gym may be loud, as it becomes loud over time, it is not as distracting. Once identified, you can also allow children with neurological disorders to wear ear protection. Consider using some form of stop and start signals other than a loud whistle. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. And reduce the visual clutter at the beginning. Again, at the beginning, and you may add later, or you section off the visual material to a particular part of the gym. For instance, in Catch, we do a lot of go, slow, and whoa activities, and in many cases kids are bringing examples of go, slow, and whoa foods or labels to the gym, and they have a board that they attach them to. That could be in a particular part of the gym, so it's not as distracting if it's all around, a lot of visual clutter around the gym for these kids. So let's look at a little, take the B and the A of basics and look at structure and predictability, which happen to be at the top of the list for the most often cited necessary conditions of classrooms that meet emotional needs of these kids. So an example of that in Catch is we want to establish clear boundaries. So at the beginning of introduction of Catch, or the implementation of the program, we establish a boundary in the gymnasium where the kids know immediately when they come to the gym they are expected to walk around a track. The same can be done in the outside activity area. So we want to introduce immediate activity immediately, because kids coming in, and it could be a structured activity where the kids come in and sit on their spot and they wait for the other kids to come in. But that downtime, that transition time, is very difficult for a child with processing, with already a lot of the stimuli going on in the gym. It can become disruptive. They can become disruptive in their behavior and act out that frustration because they're just, again, it's not misbehaving. They're telling you by their behavior that something's going on inside their little heads. So if they are moving, and we can get them moving immediately, we can reduce that. We always want to maintain a strong and permanent structure, so we can always hit the track for a particular amount of time. The teacher then tells the children, if so, to transition to another part of the gym. They have a command, a simple command of a skitter scatter, or when I say go, they're going to go to a specific spot in the gym and continue their activities during the PE period. The problem with sticking to the same structure all the time is it maybe doesn't meet the majority of the needs of the other kids in the class who get tired of doing the same thing all the time. So it's really important to add variety within the structure. One of those ways is consider hitting the track, and there is an activity called frequent flyer. and a frequent flyer, and this is just an activity where the kids go and transition from one point on the track to another, and they have to do an exercise, or they have to win a rock, paper, scissors game with another student, and then they can move to the next point in the track. Another one we use is called walk and talk. The kids come into the gym, they know they're supposed to hit the track. There may be a sign, a poster sign on the board with a cigarette. So the kids are told to walk, and they understand they walk and talk with each other and talk about all of the bad things that are associated with smoking cigarettes. Or they can talk about the importance of being a friend. The topics are limitless. Another one are task cards. You can have a task cards at different sites along the track, and the kids immediately see it and they understand, I need to do that activity. There's a number associated with the task card. So that ties into the next suggestion, is using visual task cards or pictures to direct or remind children what to do. Many of these kids with neurological disorders, pictures are easy for them to interpret and process, and immediately they feel comfortable and safe and they know what to do. Boundaries do include behavior, and we're going to talk about behavior in just a minute. The stop and start signals need to be very clear, and you want to communicate those at the beginning and be very consistent. One of the most powerful statements that we have found teachers have consistently given us feedback on is the when before the what. When I say blank, I want you to. It is quite powerful because it consistently tells the kids, listen for a particular word, and the word can be consistent. We like to integrate fruit and vegetable go food language into the when before the what. When I say go, or when I say banana, or when I say a child's name. So if you call out a child with a neurological disorder, then you are more apt to have them listen and focus on what you are asking them, or what you're asking them to do and when they are going to do it. Consider stop signals that require the children to respond verbally and physically. For instance, we holler, freeze please. The children respond, the big squeeze. And if you can imagine holding yourself as if you're cold across your arms, the kids holler out big squeeze. Or they go down to a squat position and they say 1, 2, 3, hands on knees, while they place their hands on their knees. It's another way to use two mediums, listening and also kinesthetic response, to get their attention. You can use a red colored stop sign. I've seen a teacher in a school in El Paso, when she hollers, and she was hollering Marco Polo, the kids would respond Marco. She's hollering Marco, they're hollering Polo, and she's holding up a red stop sign at the same time. We always want to allow delayed time for compliance for the kids with neurological disorders. And you know that that's many of the kids. We might have to ask them to please listen once, twice, or even 3 times. And always, always, please think about responding consistently with a thankful recognition of the children's compliance. In terms of inclusion, children with neurological disorders often feel and are socially excluded during the school day. During PE, especially during PE, in a time when play is the work of children, we want to ensure that the class routines and rules of the games are established to keep them involved. One of the most effective means that we found in our after-school program was to assign an exercise buddy with the kids, and that really helped. And we allowed the child of neurological disorder to go find, if they wanted to, at any time they could go and find their exercise buddy and play with them. And we had a lot of intergenerational games in an after-school setting, which is the same for most after-school programs. You're going to have groups of kids that represent multiple grade levels, ages, and developmental abilities. So it's in those instances, it almost cries out for the kids who are having processing issues in an activity session to have a friend with them to help them. Another that we do at the beginning of the year in assigning an exercise buddy is to have a handshake buddy. So we'll have an activity where the kids pair up and they come up with their own super secret handshake. And another is a scar buddy. We have kids pair up and they tell each other about a scar, or for the little kids, we call it a boo-boo, your scar or boo-boo buddy. So at the beginning of the year, now we've established an exercise buddy, we've established a handshake buddy, and a scar buddy. So the child with neurological disorder isn't singled out and thinking, well, I can only play with my exercise buddy. I have some other friends that I can play with. Obviously, we never let the students pick teams. We always assign teams. The teacher assigns them, or we do other random kinds of ways to assign them. We eliminate any elimination games. We want kids to be able to come back into a game. If they get out, there's some type of a activity where they have to perform a task and they can come back in. We purposely recognize not all the kids, but we do single out and recognize those children, special children, during class for their effort. Effort is number one and always is in a catch physical activity and PE program. If they feel like they're being recognized, again, reinforced behaviors repeat themselves, and we want to help the kids believe that they're doing the right thing and stay on task. We want to reduce direct competition and use standard-based goals. So we're going to have the kids compete against the clock. They're going to compete against the teacher, or they're going to compete against a standard established by another class. Always cooperative competition. Now, the caveat to being included in activities is to always allow a child with neurological disorder to self-exclude under certain conditions. We had kids that we knew their trigger, and if you're interested or not aware of what trigger means, we talked about it in the first webinar. A trigger is a situation that causes a child to become frustrated and to start acting out. We know that competition is a big one. So even in lead-up games or skill games, or for instance, there's a game called Bean Happy Feet, where we take bean bags and we try to tag each other on the feet. It can become competitive because one of the standards is if you are hit in the foot, you must go outside the boundary area, do a particular exercise, and then you can come back in. So we had a little boy who, anytime he got hit on the foot by the beanbag, he became very frustrated and would start fighting with his partner. So we learned to go to him and say, you know, Joey, look, this is the game. This is what we're doing in the game. This is how we're going to play, and it may make you feel like you do when you were playing Happy Feet. Do you want to play this game? And we allow them that choice. The older the kids get, they say, well, let me try it. And if I think I can do it, I can. If not, then I'll give you my sign that I need to be excluded, and I will come out. So we always give them that option. Communication is a major factor in helping children with neurological disorders fully and confidently participate in class. Now, these kids can't think abstractly, and so it's really not a good idea to come up to them with an open-ended question like, why did you do that? Right? For instance, and so the kids slammed, you ask the kids to stop. We have a basketball activity, and you blow the whistle or you give them the stop signal, and they slam the ball down. And so instead of saying, why did you do that, you want to be very concise and direct in your questioning. For instance, and you want to keep it personal. For instance, Joey, you slammed your ball down when I said it was time to put the balls up. Next time, put the ball down gently and tell me you're angry. Were you showing me that you did not want to stop, or were you showing me that you did not want to go back to class? So again, we're giving them a couple of options to respond to. We're communicating that we don't accept the behavior, but at the same time we understand that you are feeling something. Can you tell me what you're feeling? The other is don't use idioms or double meanings, sarcasm. For instance, we're going to run till the cows come home. So now you got a kid wondering, visualizing what it looks like for cows to come home. And it becomes very confusing to them. Especially, let me throw in there too, kids with neurological disorders will watch teachers and how teachers communicate with one another. All the kids do it. And they see the PE teachers bantering back and forth with fun, sarcastic remarks back and forth to one another. They don't understand that. And they see you laughing. You know, they think, well, it's appropriate to use that kind of language with other kids when, again, they don't understand the meaning at all. And again, use picture cards to teach acceptable behavior. I apologize for the size of the pictures because you probably can't see them, but these are picture cards which identify acceptable and unacceptable social behaviors. And referenced on the last slide here, on the reference slide, is a website that you can visit that has free printable picture cards, thousands of picture cards to use in your classrooms. And I know many of you already use these in your classes, as well as task cards. PE teachers are task card masters. Again, with clear and concise instructions, avoid verbal overload. When I'm training in catch trainings, and we do a lot of peer trainings, in the trainings where the peer teaching, it's really kind of surprising how many of the teachers over-explain a game at the beginning instead of breaking it down in sequential parts, or putting, if the activity requires that there's the children or the participants work in groups of 2 or 3 or whatever, they'll explain the entire game to everyone sitting in one group and then disperse to start the game, instead of thinking about how to stage it and scaffold it so we get kids in a position that we want them in, and then start telling them, explaining how to play a game and doing it in pieces. Check for understanding. Have children repeat instructions to one another as to what they are supposed to do. That really does help a child with neurological disorders, hearing from someone else what they're supposed to do. One of the my Achilles heels in being a teacher is pre-warning for transitions. This is a real simple one, but very important. Is you're telling the kids as you approach a transition from one game to the next, or if at the end of class, you're telling them you have so many minutes left. So at 5 minutes, I'll give them a 5-minute warning, and then I may give them another 1-minute warning. We're getting ready to transition. And I can't, you know, it's another one of those things that I don't understand as an adult, why some children have such a hard time with a transition immediately when it happens. But I've seen a big difference in those kids in our programs. When they know a change is coming, they're prepared for it, and it really does cut down on the behavior problems. We want to prepare the child with neurological disorders for all environmental and or changes in routine. So we call it huddle up time. So when they hit the track and they're walking the track, then I call in the middle of the gym, it's huddle up time for anybody that wants to know what we're going to do that day. And so they can come as they're walking the track, and they can come and talk to me, and I can confirm, you know, what we're going to do. Now the statement, the next statement about children will often seek reinforcement for routine events that are apparent to most. So how many times have children come by and say, hey coach, what are we doing? What are we doing today? Even though they know the routine, and they know it's probably going to be the same, children with neurological disorders will seek out reinforcement. So it's at that time, I know you get tired of explaining to the kids, but be very specific and supportive about explaining exactly what's going to happen that day, even if you've told the kid the same thing 3 days in a row. They're seeking out comfort and safety in knowing what's going to come next. Providing a safe and instructional environment requires establishing, obviously, behavioral boundaries that clearly define how you want the kids to act in the gym, and also the consequences that are going to occur if they do not. One of the most powerful steps we took in our program was to try to keep our rules as simple as possible and to a minimum. And we did that by establishing a rule of respect. Respect was the #1 rule. We defined it as treating each other as you wanted to be treated, and we were going to help each other have fun every single day in PE. We demonstrated what that acceptable behavior looked and sounded like. We would bring a child up, and I would talk, or the other counselors were instructed to talk to the child and explain how and demonstrate how you talk to someone when you're angry, how you ask for a favor, how you say you're sorry if you did something wrong. And we practiced that consistently. In fact, every single day we identified the main rule was respect, and what did respect mean, what the definition was. That was our only rule in the gym. The kids seemed to know that you're not supposed to hit, you're not supposed to curse, you're not supposed to talk back to the teacher, you're not supposed to damage the equipment. They know all of those rules. So it really did help to make the one rule, because then it became more easily enforceable. You want to provide consistent and frequent positive feedback, obviously. What gets reinforced gets repeated. You want to call the student's name first and attempt to get direct eye contact when addressing behaviors, both positive and negative. And when I say attempt to get direct eye contact, that may be a problem for a child with a neurological disorder. It's a common trait in that they may look at you, but they will not focus and keep eye contact. It's not that they're not listening to you, it's the manifestation of the disorder. And again, after you give them instructions or you are discussing a behavior with them, you want to ask them to repeat back to you what you said. You want to react to inappropriate behavior in a neutral voice, and we spent a lot of time on these issues the first webinar. Be very direct and calm. You want to designate a signal that a student can give when they need a timeout. I talked about this earlier. So a high five, simply coming up to you and telling you, Coach, I need timeout, and you allow them a specific location in the activity area where they can go and regain their composure. We call it fix-it time. Yeah, that's fine. Just go fix it, Joey, and when you feel like you want to come back, come on back in the activity. Provide visual pictures in that designated location for options the student may choose to calm themselves. So there are those behavioral cards that have a picture of a child laying down, drawing a picture, listening to music, and so they have those choices when they go to that timeout. You're always wanting to look for triggers, and those triggers are usually indicative of a child has an unusual behavior. They're starting to show some stress. They're wandering the gym. They're getting a little bit loud in their discussion, in their voice, in their interaction with the other kids. They've done something in a group game to cause the other children to start to become upset. At those times when you're recognizing that trigger, it's important to go and allow the child, or encourage the child then to go to that fix-it time and go fix it. They may argue with you, but the more often that they are involved in an environment that's supportive in other ways, they usually will accept that opportunity to go and take some time out. Children with neurological disorders often use repetitive verbal arguments or questions when upset. For instance, if a child got hit, they felt like they were wronged in the game, somebody was cheating in the game, they'll continually provide or verbalize an argument about and argue that they cheated. And no matter what you do in terms of your logic, if it was even a misunderstanding, logically is not going to help. Again, it may take the child some time out, or what you need to start doing is thinking about bargaining, usually getting the other child to discuss and to talk to, and at least say, provide an I'm sorry to their neurological disorder partner, then that may work. This is a tough one. When they get into that repetitive argument, it usually takes time out for them and a discussion, time to discuss what happened with the other partners in the game before the child with a neurological disorder feels safe again and ready to re-enter the activity. Refrain from telling these children that they're in trouble. Be specific about the behavior being addressed and the consequences, and talk about consequences rather than in trouble. And we established what we called a no-fault environment in our gym. It wasn't about whose fault it was. It was about who was responsible and what's the consequence. Think back to the difference in labeling a child as autistic as opposed to recognizing that a child has a condition somewhere on the autistic spectrum. Think about how the children think about it. Getting in trouble and somebody's fault. I'm at fault. I'm a bad kid. I did something bad. And the difference in that from no, you're not in trouble, you made a decision. We're going to talk about decisions, and every decision has good and poor consequences. So let's just talk about those consequences, and we're going to help you make a better decision next time. That no-fault environment changed the culture of our gym. It changed the way all of our counselors started interacting with all of our children, and it made a significant positive difference in the number of problems we had with all of our children. Management, supervision, and instruction coexist as equal and contributing partners in effective educational programs. As all of you know, they're inexorably tied together. So the instructional program is also, in the way it's planned, is real important in helping keep people on task and to help meet the needs of the children with neurological disorders. Lesson plans should reflect that we're going to reach a maximum number of learners. We're going to assume different styles, skills, and experiences and learning styles. It emphasizes a flexible, customizable curriculum, and we're going to use multiple modes of presenting content, engaging students, and assessing comprehension. So what would that look like, let's say, in a lesson where we're going to learn to throw? So we're going to have a demonstration by a teacher. We're going to have pictures of different throwing motions: overhand, underhand, sidearm. We're going to have throwing stations. We're going to have a video that kids may be able to look at a video of how to throw. We're going to have throwing stations with different targets. We're going to throw different objects. We're going to throw in different directions with different forces and different throwing motions. Children are provided with a clothespin or a scarf to attach or tie around their lead leg so they can understand which leg they're supposed to step with as they throw the ball. We're going to give vivid, specific directions. Hold the ball, boys and girls, in your throwing hand and scratch behind your ear. Point where you want to throw, step and with your scarf or your clothespin and throw the ball. We're going to have peer teaching with your exercise buddy. We're going to write directions for throwing. And always effort is recognized and rewarded above all else. Now, that's an example, one example of a possible lesson where we're using the instructional best practices. We're trying to meet the needs of all of the students, and in meeting the needs of all of the students and in their learning styles and their level of information processing, then we're probably going to be meeting the needs of that child with neurological disorders. The routines and strategies of Catch PE and Catch Physical Activity are designed specifically to keep a large number of children active, ensure they understand what they're doing, they have multiple opportunities, they learn to play cooperatively, and they support individual and team success. So hopefully you've got an idea of how we try to how the Catch program, and not only the Catch program, but all of these suggestions for children with neurological disorders are consistent across all subject and content area and classrooms. The experience for the children is overall, in a global sense, providing that this experience for these children is understanding the unique challenges that they face each day and how to structure that environment to meet their needs. It's not another you have to do thing. I think a lot of teachers with more research, and certainly a lot more research and a lot more information about these types of children in our classrooms than there were 10 or even 10 or 15 years ago. My daughter is 35 years old, so it's been an evolving science over the last 35 years for me, and there's still new information coming out. And often teachers, I think, see as something new comes into the gym, well, this is something more I have to do. Really, it's recognizing that a portion of your students really do need your help in order to feel safe in your classrooms and have the same opportunities to learn as everyone else. In my travels, I've seen a lot of reactions, different reactions to children with neurological disorders, a lot of stories, personal stories about the struggles teachers have. I mean, I'll go back to that lesson I just described, kind of a model lesson. How in the world is a teacher with 80 kids in a gym, in a small gym, with few resources, going to be able to construct a lesson that mirrors, a best case. So again, I understand the issues and the problems associated with it. But I can kind of put the reactions or the teachers that I've run into in about 3 categories. And the first are those confident professionals, and you see their classes and they're structured, very well structured, well planned out, lots and lots of things and choices for the kids to make, good management skills and supervisory skills and smooth transitions and routines and such. And even if they don't necessarily understand some of the behaviors that are exhibited by these kids, they tend to understand from a professional level. They look at it and it is, I wonder why, let me go find out. Then there's those that have kind of display a type of parental love toward the kids. They're not real sure what's going on. They can't quite figure it out, but they're going to work with the kid until something good happens. There was a child nutrition director at one of our trainings, and she talked about this kid, and I'll just name him Joey. Joey came to the cafeteria, and she had all of the kids have to have a certain number of food groups on their tray before they leave the line. And so Joey comes to the end of the line, and there's a fruit cup, and he needs to put a fruit cup on his tray. And as she explained it, Joey said, I don't want that. And she said, Joey, sweetie, honey, you need to put it on your tray. So she logically tried to convince him that he had to put that piece of fruit or that fruit cup on his tray, to the point where Joey started crying. So she let him go that day. And the next day she decided, I'm going to try again. About the 3rd day, she finally figured out, she told Joey that they played a game, that she was trying to tell him he didn't have to eat it, he could throw it away. So she moved a trash can close to the door of the cafeteria, and she made a game with Joey to put the fruit cup on his tray, and when he went by the trash can, I bet you can't throw it in the trash can. So she bargained with him. So it became a game for Joey, and sure enough, over time, Joey took a bite and started eating fruit. So you have those types of teachers. And then the third group is those who are unaware and seem to be unwilling to accept that there are children who just are so different, their behavior is not a manifestation of their trying to be disruptive or disobedient. Almost all other disabilities produce compassion for the disabled child because we can see it. For the child with the neurological disorders, you can't see the physical neurological condition causing the behavior. So for these children, often the opposite feelings are manifested in those around us. So we tend to lose our compassion for these children. We take it personally. And that's also one of the top suggestions and lists of what you can do to improve the educational instructional environment for your children of neurological disorders is don't take it personally. And at times I understand it's very hard not to. So today's suggestions for designing an accessible learning environment works for all children. And think about that just a minute. The things that I identified are really not that earth-shattering. They're really not that novel. It's an attempt to meet all learning modalities of all children. And the suggested models create a safe, positive environment that reinforces respectful behavior between all participants, teachers included. So I want you to consider yourself. How many of us as adults have ever pointed to a picture in an ad or a menu to show what we want? Or looked for a picture at the Department of Motor Vehicles to what line do we get in? How many of us need a break from a task you're working on because you are about to blow a fuse? You are working with a very, very difficult child, and they're being extremely combative, and you call to a fellow teacher, please come, I need a break. I need to compose myself. How many of you appreciate an offer for help when your principal comes in and you're struggling, or after you've made a mistake and they discuss with you how can they help? What were you thinking? Benefit from discussing disagreements with others. Or you like being offered alternatives instead of being forced to accept one that makes you feel inadequate. So what if you gave the option to all of your children in your gym to give you a timeout signal? And I know some of you are thinking, whoa, that's not going to work. But if you slowly started integrating and you talked to them in a respectful way about the meaning of, or the usefulness of timeout, the usefulness of being able to sit down if you have a disagreement with someone else and go sit down and identify what happened instead of who was at fault. And if you create that kind of environment for all of your children, you know, what would that look like? So in the end, are we really any different than our kids? So if we can think about our kids as adults, how would we treat other adults? And how would we help other adults succeed if they were in our class? So again, thank you very much for listening. And there are some additional references on the reference page. And please, well, you know, Google today, all kinds of resources out there. So thanks.
Thanks, Dr. John. As usual in these webinars, I learn something new every time, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful for your time today and very thorough presentation. I've got a question. We've got a couple there, and we've only got a couple of minutes left. Parents, you know, you're working with the kids. Do you work with the parents as well?
Absolutely. And again, it may not be easy for a PE teacher who has 500 kids coming through their program to work with a parent, but in every instance where you suspect that there's a child with a disorder, talking to the parents is probably your most. I know that someone would ask, well, how do you recognize when it's manipulation or when it's actually a disability? And the best way to do that is obviously you have a school counselor, but the parents are probably the first source. It doesn't necessarily mean the parents that the child has been even diagnosed yet. The best way, Peter, I found to do that is to create a personal relationship with that child. For instance, many of the kids that come in our after-school program, we know specific kids that we pull out and we have a one-on-one with them and we tell them exactly what's going to happen during the day. And we ask them how their day has been. We ask them what, you know, we have non-supervisory, non-management, non-instructional discussions with them, talks about what's going on in their life and how they've been. So it is the parent who's going to be able to help support, and especially if you can have discussions with the parent, with the child present when you're talking to the parent, is probably the most powerful, most helpful. And again, a question about how you distinguish between manipulation and neurotransmitter imbalances was a question. I don't have a professional answer for that other than the longer you observe the child, if there's consistent difficulty in the child relating to, in the relationship with other children in the gym, if they, I tell you, it's a gut feeling,
yeah,
right? But immediately, if you assume that a child is being manipulative, I would make the assumption first that it's a processing, it's a neurological problem first, and addressing it, because again, if you address it logically with the kid with their behaviors and they simply tend to fight back, then the next step is, and you're not sure, the next step is working with the school counselor or with the parent.
Right. Very good. Well, John, thanks again. You know, 35 years, your continued efforts to create and support healthy environments for the children, not only here in Texas, but all over the country now. Very much appreciated, and I'm sure these kids are learning healthy habits for a lifetime. Thanks again.
And thanks for all of you out there who are working with these kids every day. You're doing great work, spiritual work. Thank you.
Until next month. Bye now.